Earlier this week, France marked the 10th anniversary of a chapter of real horror in its recent history.
Terror in the heart of Paris. Masked and heavily armed, two men entered the building in the centre of the French capital late this morning and began firing. By the time they'd stopped, at least 12 people were dead. Many others were seriously injured.
On the 7th of January 2015, two French-born Muslim brothers of Algerian heritage attacked the offices of the satirical magazine Charlie Hebdo, which had a history of lampooning Muslim leaders, including the Prophet Muhammad. 2 days later, they were themselves shot and killed. At the same time, another Muslim man took hostages in a kosher supermarket in Paris and killed 4 people, all of whom were Jews. To discuss the long-term impact of these events, we're joined by Nabila Ramdani, a journalist of French-Algerian heritage and author of the book Fixing France. As a commentator, she's known for her strong views on the position of Muslims in France. Good morning.
Good morning, Edward.
I don't know how you reacted to the anniversary, but as it happens, I was in France earlier in the week, and seeing those television pictures again of what happened that day really did bring home what a terrifying and brutal event this was.
Yes, absolutely. And dare I say, I was based a few streets away when the Charlie Hebdo attacks started in Paris 10 years ago. So I, of course, remember it all like yesterday. And there was a massive shock about what happened, even though there had been very sinister warnings beforehand, including a firebomb attack on Charlie Hebdo's offices and indeed death threats. It was a very poignant anniversary, and the commemorations were very significant indeed. And President Macron made it abundantly clear that he wanted it to be about the victims, the families of the deceased, and indeed about the barbaric atrocities, rather than to debate the ins and outs of satire and indeed free speech. And I think more and more people have come to the same conclusion.
In the aftermath, there was that extraordinary march in Paris, attended by, I think, tens of thousands of people, in solidarity with the victims. And the slogan they chanted was, "Je suis Charlie," I am Charlie, to identify themselves with the magazine. Did you, as a French Muslim, feel able to say that yourself?
Well, absolutely. I think anybody in the right mind was absolutely appalled by what had happened, and an awful lot of people came together to condemn all that very forcefully. And there have been, nationwide marches. The Je suis Charlie solidarity was very apparent, but I would say, however, that 10 years later, the Charlie Hebdo legacy, certainly lives on. The magazine is still published and receives government security grants. But the collective response we all witnessed in 2015 has by no means stood firm. And on the contrary, many argue that the attacks highlighted deep tensions in French society that have still not been resolved.
Do you think that's true? Do you think that's it's a kind of touchstone for a real fault line in French society?
Yes, I think, they are cracks in the allegedly Je suis Charlie solidarity. This was appeared straight away when even school children were punished for not observing a minute's silence for the victims. This was seen as extremely hypocritical. Those who wanted to question the free speech myth were not just denied an opinion, but they were actively demonized. There were plenty of strict laws concerning hateful discourse, and yet the so-called right to spread prejudice and hate against Islam was apparently being championed. There's a perception that it's fine to demonize Islam, but not other faiths. And this is pretty unfortunate in a country which has the largest Muslim community in Western Europe, about 6 million people.
And what do you make of the way the magazine has marked the anniversary? Because they've had a competition for cartoons about God, which is clearly deliberately provocative, I suppose, and trying to make a point.
Yes, I think they called on cartoonists to submit the funniest and indeed the meanest depiction of God. I think the competition idea was unoriginal and crass. And this is a very important point. It produced absolute rubbish. I've looked at some of the winning cartoons, and a bored toddler without a developed sense of humour could have done better. I mean, art is meant to challenge and shock, and this didn't. And my criticism is nothing to do with religion. It's to do with people pretending that Charlie Hebdo is worth protecting because it has an essential quality to it, and that this quality gives it a pass when it ignores hate laws. Well, I think it shouldn't be allowed this pass, in my opinion, because it produces material that creates division and hatred while not actually entertaining anyone, perhaps beyond a few bigots.
Can I finally and briefly ask you about a coincidence, which is that Jean-Marie Le Pen died on the day of the anniversary, someone who founded the National Front and was often accused of being bigoted in all sorts of ways. And yet it's worth saying, isn't it, that his party, the party he founded, although it's got a different name now, is very successful in France at the moment.
Yes, I mean, Le Pen was by far the most influential and indeed controversial far-right politician in post-war French history, and his legacy will live on for decades. And we see it in his daughter, Marine Le Pen, who still hopes to become president in 2027 if she can stay out of prison. She's currently, involved in legal trouble, and the case against her embezzling money, allegedly embezzling money from the European Parliament, looks very strong.
Well.
But I think, it's very easy to link the career progress of Jean-Marie Le Pen with the polemics around Charlie Hebdo. It was Jean-Marie Le Pen who in many ways made it easier for racists to express their opinions about people deemed to be outsiders.
Well,
and the history of Charlie Hebdo ran in parallel with Jean-Marie Le Pen.
Forgive me,
the magazine,
we must leave it there because we run out of time. It's fascinating stuff, and I know we'll come back to that subject. Very many thanks for joining us this morning.